What's up, guys? Welcome back to the things I learned this week. This is the second installment. I'm more or less going to kind of be picking up where I left off last week, but if you haven't seen last week's video, fear not. It's not critical to understanding what I'm going to be talking about here. So you might want to check it out. It's just in the playlist entitled My Holistic Health Journey. But without further ado, let's get into it. I'm seeing now my hair is a little bit overgrown, but quarantine will do that, right? So what I wanted to focus on this week relates to the whole health Karen that I was talking about last week, and looking internally to improve your health and find out the changes that you need to make to improve your well-being. And I think this idea actually predates the notion of the whole health Karen by like a couple centuries, which is Yang Sheng, which is essentially, it's an ancient Chinese philosophy that takes like a holistic view. So it incorporates mind, body, and soul to detach from negative emotions and develop a conscious approach to foster self-care and healing. So i.e. Generating the relaxation response, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and releasing all of those hormones that heal your body, in contrast to the stress response, which enables when you're constantly in fear or anxiety, and things of that nature. So they're definitely related. Like I said in the last video, the whole health Karen is basically the belief in doing what you need to do to bring your body into the relaxation response as much as possible. So two of the things I talked about specifically were looking internally to find validation and see what aspects of your situation are contributing to the stress response, like stressing you out, making you fearful or anxious, and using that to determine the changes that you need to make, and take personal responsibility to follow through to improve your well-being and health. So Yang Sheng is it's the philosophy of nurturing life to discover imbalances in the qi long before they turn into outright diseases. So kind of going back to some of my motivation for doing this whole thing to begin with, or seeking or setting out to become a natural or holistic health expert, is just the belief that the medical establishment treats symptoms rather than the underlying cause. So Yang Sheng essentially is the opposite of that, where you're looking to stamp out whatever underlying little health issues that there is before it really becomes something serious and detrimental to your health. So that's one thing that really resonated with me when I found this. And essentially what it is deploying mindfulness in all of your daily activities. So just being present throughout your day and whatever you're doing, and how that quality, the ability to be present, really is going to give you all sorts of insights and really improve your health. So as the active pursuit of the best possible functioning and balance of the whole self, it definitely takes into account things like relationships to people and to the environment. So kind of like what I was talking about last week, where two of the biggest determinants of your health or your well-being are your network or your support system, and inclusion and feeling like you belong with those groups, as well as your ability to look to your internal pilot light and, like I said, determine, or your internal pilot light or your intuition, and determine what changes you need to make to feel fulfilled and alleviate any anxieties or any inconsistencies between your place in life and how you see yourself. So I want to focus more on the looking to the internal pilot light. Um, your network and support system definitely is important in feeling fulfilled, and just preventing the stress response in general. I talked to my grandparent or my grandfather 2 nights ago, and then I talked to my parents yesterday, and that really contributed to feelings of well-being. But if you're not satisfied with who you are or where you are in life, there's all sorts of other things that make you feel good ultimately aren't going to have that much bearing, because you have um, anxiety and I guess just uneasiness over your conduct in life. So essentially, that brings me to a quote from Zig Ziglar, who many of you may know, but he's a renowned salesman and motivational speaker. And one quote that really stuck with me from him is that you can't behave in a way inconsistent with how you view yourself. And this is basically the idea of looking to your internal pilot light in a nutshell, because when you do that and your outward expression of who you are to the world is inconsistent with how you see yourself internally, that's obviously just going to create anxiety and depression, and ultimately is going to lead to the stress response, which, for those of you who haven't seen my last video or just don't know in general, the stress response is what happens in the stress response is when your body secretes cortisol and other immune suppressing hormones. So ultimately it can make you sick, or just really not be able to improve your health. Especially when you're constantly in stress response mode, which is also the fight or flight or the sympathetic nervous system, which from an evolutionary standpoint was for when there was predators or you needed to activate your fight or flight response because your life was endangered. That's where it came from. But these days, the modern way of living, there's all sorts of stressors and feelings that can contribute to the activation of the stress response. And Dr. Lissa Rankin, who I mentioned a lot last week, believes that, or did research to discover that on average, the typical American is going into the stress response about 50 times a day, which is way, way more than it should be. So getting back to what I was saying, just behaving in a way that's inconsistent with how you see yourself is going to contribute to the activation of the stress response. And when you look internally and you have the ability to determine what it is that you need to do in order to conduct yourself consistently with how you see yourself, that's gonna ease your mind and really just settle all those feelings of anxiety or stress or depression, and it's gonna boost your well-being and contribute to the relaxation response. Going off of that, a person who came onto my radar recently, but not within this week, in the most recent couple months, and a quote that I learned from him this week, though, is Master Shi Hang Yi, who is he's a master of the Shaolin Temple in Europe. I'm not sure which country it's in, but I was watching an interview with him, and another thing that stuck with me that he said was that the faster that you're able to adapt to change, the less problems that you'll have. So it really relates to the quote from Zig, in the sense that just fixations or ideals and clinging to them again, ultimately is going to contribute to the stress response and prevent you from feeling fulfilled and being who you are. Um, it's external fixations like that are part of what he describes as the 5 hindrances to self mastery. And I want to focus on two of them specifically. One of them is sensual desire, which kind of encompasses the inability to adapt. You know, it's like clinging to all sorts of, or giving your attention to all sorts of sensory stimuli that give you positive emotions or release dopamine. And when you follow those temptations and you are under their power, essentially that's going to prevent you from any mental clarity because it's going to just be something that's like a fixation in your mind. I myself have that issue a lot of the time, and it just completely prevents you from being present, which brings me to the next of the 5 hindrances that I want to discuss, which is restlessness, which is essentially characterized by the inability to be present. And you can kind of think of it like a monkey brain, which in the human brain is thought of to be the amygdala. And you can think of it as kind of just like a monkey jumping from branch to branch, always worried about what comes next rather than being in the present moment. And I myself have had issues with this for a while. Just giving into things that release dopamine and always kind of looking for the next fix, so to speak. Just the next thing that's gonna give you pleasure and give you that dopamine rush. So I'm gonna be fasting, doing an extended fast coming up here next week, and I think I'm gonna start a more strict keto diet this week in preparation for that. But I think that's gonna help me alleviate and pinpoint my tendency to do that and just like look for the next stimulus because it's gotten pretty bad at a certain point. So I'm looking forward to that too. So, but getting back to Yang Sheng, I think, or I found that it's really beneficial in just, or not just contributing to the rest and digest relaxation response, but it's also really helpful to identify when your body is in the sympathetic stress response and kind of determine or pinpoint what individual stressors or stimuli are contributing to that response. So it's kind of getting back to the healthcare, and it's like looking to your internal pilot light or your intuition or just internally to identify what it is that's causing your unhappiness and ultimately the stress response. So there's a number of ways that you can do that to help improve upon the ability to be present and recognize your tendency to activate the stress response. But the biggest things, and they're the 4 baskets laid out by Dr. Richard Janke, and I'm probably butchering that name. He's a Qigong instructor, and he has his channel on YouTube. It's Richard, Jahnke. But he said that there's 4 things which make up the 4 baskets that are really helpful in bringing you peace of mind and allowing you to be present. And they are movement, which is like just exercise and Tai Chi, meditation, mindfulness, and self-massage. And all of those things can be applied to not just contribute to the tendency for your body to go into the relaxation response, but also to help you pinpoint what it is that's contributing to the stress response. So, Master Shihan Yang, who had the 5 hindrances to self-mastery, laid out 4 things that you can do to prevent um, those hindrances, and they're really closely related to um, the benefits of the 4 baskets: meditation, mindfulness, massage, and movement. In the sense that when you practice those things or you do those exercises, it gives you the ability to, I guess, take it upon yourself to find the things to prevent the hindrances, which are recognition is the first one, or the first step. So just the recognition in my case that um, I have fixations or obsessions over little things like, um, eating at the right time after I'm coming off of an intermittent fasting, or getting protein first and giving myself a certain amount of time before I ingest any carbs, and the fixation over that, recognizing that I have the tendency to do that, and recognizing that I have the tendency to jump from one thing to the next thing that releases dopamine in my brain, whether it be nicotine or not necessarily sugar so much, because I've pretty much weaned myself off of direct sugar, but like carbs or something like that. Um, whatever it is that's preventing me from being present. The first step in finding that is just the recognition that um, that you're being unable to be present. And the second thing is accepting the situation. Um, it's kind of like, instead of seeing that you do have that tendency and just completely ignoring it, it's like kind of accepting it and acting on it. And you do that by investigating um, your mental and emotional state, and why it came up, why this fixation occurred. And in my case, like I said, most times it's just like that dopamine release, the pleasure seeking mechanism of your brain, that is preventing you from being present. And finally, the last prevention for the 5 hindrances is to non-identify with that stimulus, and that's probably the hardest part. But you can do that by, again, really through meditation, I would say, and mindfulness, and um, realizing that those impulses, when your neurons are firing, seeing that those aren't really you. That's just your thoughts, or your body or your emotions that are basically taking a stranglehold over your soul or your spirit, and contributing to those obsessions. You know what I mean? So um, basically, I said I'm going to be fasting coming up next week, but I'm really looking forward to it as a way to not just improve my health and reboot my system internally, but just also as a way to um, get over the obsessions and fixations that I have, for that dopamine rush, for foods, like I said, carbs, and also nicotine. That's gonna be the hardest thing, but I'm gonna quit smoking for that too. I figured I might as well. I want to do it because I think you got to put your money where your mouth is. If I want to be a health expert, a natural health expert at that, I can't be smoking as much as I enjoy it. I know that it's not good for my health, and it's super hypocritical for me to continue to do that if I am going on this journey. So I'm looking at the fast as a way to just detox from Sorry guys, I got a call right in the middle of the video, even though it was scheduled, but I lost track of time. So sorry about that. I'm just gonna have to edit that out. So like I was saying, I'm looking really forward to the fast as a way to break free of the obsessions and fixations that I have, more than just to food, but also just all of the toxic stimuli that I have in my life that, um, through mindfulness and qigong practice, have been able to recognize, contribute to me not being able to be present. So, um, one thing going off of that too is I think, I don't know if you can't really see it probably too well. Um, Maybe a little bit right there and like up by the top of my nose. But it's either psoriasis or eczema. And it's from stress, not alcohol consumption. I don't really drink anymore. But from stress and just poor diet. And I really think that it's really from like internal parasites that I've built up from, I don't know, not necessarily poor diet, but just too much sugar and too many things that grains, and simple carbs that ultimately are converted to glucose or sugar, and just a, a long time coming of that stuff. Like I don't overdo it too much, but it's just like, I think it's kind of built up after a while. So the fast is going to be a good way to get rid of that, I believe, and reboot my body. And again, getting back to what I was saying about the medical establishment, just basically diagnosing issues and prescribing cures for the symptoms rather than the root cause. I have this corticosteroid cream, and I forget the like technical term or the medical term for the brand or the cream, but it's basically you just apply it on your face or wherever you have an infected area, and it clears up like the rash and everything too. But again, you can put that on for weeks or months and it clears up, but it comes right back. And it's another example of the medical establishment just treating the symptoms rather than the underlying cause, because it's got to be coming from somewhere. Maybe it's stress, but like I said, I think it's more internal. I get the sense that when you have like stomach grumbles and stuff, that's not necessarily just your stomach or your small intestine telling you that you're hungry. I think it's something more than that. I think it really is internal parasites or just yeast and candida and mold and fungus that's been built up for years. And that's something that ultimately is giving you those obsessions and those fixations and emotions, telling you when you're hungry, that you are craving simple carbs or sugar. And like I said, the meditation and the 4 baskets and Sheng is a good way to come to the realization that all of those thoughts and emotions aren't really you. It's whatever it is. In this case, or my case, I think it is something internal, something that doesn't belong there. That's an invader and toxic. So I'm looking forward to the fast for that. I think that's about it. Just a few little like factoids to wrap up. Other things I learned that are not really related this week. Well, I guess the first one is, so sugar, I found out is, and I kind of already knew this, but I got definitive confirmation that sugar is definitely the most inflammatory food that you can consume. I said before, carbs are converted to glucose. So like any bread that you have, especially white bread that's made from enriched white flour and not whole wheat, is a simple carb, and it converts to glucose much more quickly than a whole whole grain or whole wheat, which basically spikes your insulin more and puts more sugar into your system. So that's one thing if you want to improve like just your joint functioning and just cut down on your inflammation. I would recommend severely limiting your sugar. I know it's hard. It took me a long time to do that. So, um, I feel you in that regard. And another thing too, so just in terms again of boosting health, um, I want to make a suggestion of sipping water every 15 minutes, ideally water with lemon. Um, though acidic, lemon has an alkalizing effect on the body, and basically when you ingest it, it has a pH well above 7 when metabolized, so it really neutralizes all the acidity in your body. And when you sip water, lemon water, and you can add apple cider vinegar too, one of the supplements that I swear by, really good for probiotic gut health. Um, when you sip water with lemon or apple cider vinegar or both every 15 minutes, you flush the microbes that are in your throat, which a dry throat increases your risk of infection or disease. And when you sip every 15 minutes, it neutralizes all those microbes by moving them to the stomach where your stomach acid can kill them. So that's just one suggestion I wanted to pass on for staying healthy, virus free. And that's pretty much it. Some things I'm going to include next week is the start of the fasting journal. And I'll be doing more probably daily videos that are going to be brief, but just short updates once I start with that. I'm going to talk about a breathing exercise that I developed using specific or envisioning specific acupressure points. That's really helped me calm down and alleviate feelings of anxiety and ultimately activate the relaxation response in my life. So that's it for now. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video, guys.